parent or a caregiver, some educators, our goal tonight is really equip you with some really practical tools and strategies to help some of the teens in your life to help build strong time management skills. And those skills are not only going to be critical for high school, but really essential for college and for beyond. And before we dive into the workshop, I do want to go over just a couple of things with you. So we do have a small group course coming up this summer. It's primarily designed for 11th and 12th graders and those who are attending college. And it's especially helpful for those who may be struggling with some executive functioning skills. And most of us know some teens who are struggling in this area. It's really designed to be very hands-on, engaging. We've designed it with a lot of gamified activities, discussions, real-world applications in a very supportive, very small group setting. It's led by BJ, our director of education. If it sounds like something that maybe your teen could benefit from or someone in your life could benefit from, you can learn more at strategiesforlearning.com/slash BHS. And then also, I wanted to share that we do offer just one-on-one summer support. And our summer support, is really targeted to help students maintain and strengthen those academic skills that they've worked really hard to build this school year. It's also a really great chance to build their executive functioning strategies. For those who may be struggling with, confidence kind of falling behind their peers, it's a really good chance for us to really level up for that next school year. Without all the pressure of the regular school work and test prep and all of that. So summer is a really great time for students. Um, and with that in mind, I want to go ahead and introduce you to our speaker. So today our speaker is our very own BJ McIntyre. He is the Director of Education at Strategies for Learning. BJ has over a decade of experience in education and in youth development. He holds a master's degree from Columbia University. At the Teachers College. He also has completed his postgraduate coursework for the Educational Therapy certification, and he's just about to complete his dyslexia certification as well. BJ has taught a wide range of subjects, including language arts. At the high school level, he's taught a lot of executive functioning, financial literacy, social emotional learning. He's also worked extensively with educators on curriculum development, especially around the areas of executive functioning. And his passion is really supporting students with learning and motivational challenges. And then lastly, in case you missed my announcement in the beginning, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box below. We'll have a chance at the very end for a short Q&A. And then if BJ has a chance, he might be able to answer some of those questions throughout the presentation. So with that in mind, I'll hand it over to BJ.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine, for that introduction. And thank everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you. Let me go ahead and share my screen before we get started. 1 second. But yeah, as Christine mentioned, I've taught and tutored a variety of courses. And the one thing that's common and comes up over and over again is the need for time management skills. As Christine mentioned, I'm kind of one of the resident executive function coaches here. And that is kind of like a central piece of executive functioning in general, just that time management piece and really helping students with procrastination and motivation. And all of it really ties together with just students being able to get things in on time. So let's go ahead and go over this agenda. All right, so first, I just want to, establish the sense of urgency. Why is time management important? And you'll see there's direct correlations to grades and academic performance. That's backed up by a lot of research out there, which we'll touch on for sure. Why teens struggle with time management is the next thing we'll talk about. And there's a variety of reasons. I kind of organize it according to different areas. So we'll go over that just to be a little bit organized with how we talk about that. After that, we'll go into evidence-based strategies that kind of tie into these struggles as to why teens struggle. And again, this will be rooted in research and youth development. Another thing I really want to go into, and I don't know if you've heard about it, but temporal motivation theory is a really big emerging idea or piece of, I guess, a lot of work around motivation is around temporal motivation theory. And the idea is really just, it's probably familiar to you, just the idea that we get less motivated when the rewards aren't clear. And then I'll talk more about that. There's actually a particular formula and a way to actually break this down quantitatively, to be able to help your child. But it really just has to do with reward systems and motivation and really seeing the purpose of something. And we'll get into that too. But kind of this whole presentation is kind of rooted in temporal motivation theory. So we'll definitely talk a lot about that a little bit later. And it's not as complicated as it seems. All right. So first, why does time management matter? So in 1991, some psychologists, Bruce Britton and Abraham Tesser, did a study on college students, or actually high school students who were college bound. And they found something kind of surprising, that time management skills, when you're able to actually quantify it, are better predictors of academic success than even SAT scores are. So SATs are all the rage. We spend a lot of time doing SAT prep and SAT tutoring, when really the bread and butter is really getting students to turn things in on time and being able to manage their time effectively. And that just lends itself to so many benefits and so many things, including test taking. So time management is kind of the umbrella. So for me, I'm kind of not surprised, but this is definitely an emphasis that students should know and parents should know. Another thing I want to point out is that procrastination, you probably can assume this, but it's also backed up by quantitative research. Procrastination has been shown repeatedly to have a negative correlation with grades. So whenever you're able to quantify procrastination, or the amount of time it takes students to actually initiate a task, is directly correlated with their academic performance. So as students get older and you start seeing them slip and the procrastination becomes a little bit more noticeable, it's really time to jump on that, because it's a real predictor of academic performance. All righty, so let's move on. So I wanted to include a few pieces of interaction. So if you wouldn't mind, so in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, I was just wondering your personal experience. How much does it feel like you not having enough time to do things yourself contributes to your stress, your own stress? So, one being not at all, like your time management is on point, you always have enough time, to five, like you feel like you never have enough time in your schedule to get things done. And how does that impact your stress? So, I'll go ahead and participate as well.
Mhm.
All right, Tracy, 4, 5. Christine, you're like the executive function pro, so I'm not surprised. Christine's over scheduling, so you practice this stuff a lot. Yep, Holly, 4, 5, 5. Yeah, so a lot of us, I know we can empathize with our youth, right? We go through a lot of the same things, and the difference is we're not coached on this, but as adults, we come up with a lot of skills and strategies and stumble through it, right? But we do have an opportunity to hear, to provide explicit instruction and evidence-based strategies and kind of catch them before they fall. And that's the benefit we can actually give to our teens. We had to go through it the hard way, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for them. All right. So as promised, we're going to go over some reasons why teens struggle with time management. And honestly, these are reasons why we all struggle with time management. But given the nature of their development, it's going to be more pronounced with teenagers, obviously. So I wanted to kind of break this down into different categories, because I'm going to frame this as kind of a consultation. So in the following slides, I'm going to give you different case studies according to these different areas of need, and come and try to come up with different solutions that can address these different challenges. So different reasons we struggle with time management can, for example, be behavioral. So we'll go into temporal motivation theory a little bit later, but it really just has to do establishing reward systems, and really not really instant gratification, is how I would summarize this. Like students really not seeing the forest for the trees, or not really understanding the end goal. So the more you make that pronounced, or the sooner you can get the reward to them or make it more clear, the more they'll understand the importance of the assignment. Also, lack of social component. So I talk a lot about body doubling with students, especially for ADHD. Just having somebody to model the learning process or the studying process is really powerful for a lot of students. Even if you're just sitting in the kitchen studying with a parent, seeing them do that is just really motivational, and it's proven over and over again in research that this is very, very helpful. And also just it not being goal oriented. So a lot of students have their own passions, they have their own goals. So being able to specifically tie that to like a love of art or a love of sports, being able to tie what they're doing to some future passion that they have is going to be extremely helpful. And I make sure that I do that in all of my coaching sessions for sure. We also can't forget the cognitive. So this is more so things that are beyond the student's control, and we need to really address with either ADHD friendly strategies or different methodologies that address certain ways that the students think. So, for example, with the ADHD and executive function challenges, a lot of students just simply have time blindness. So, time for them is really associated with the enormity of the task. So, or really their how they relate to the task. So, if it's a task that they have a negative association with, then it'll seem like it's going to take a lot longer. Or when they're working on something, they'll have a tendency to either space out or really not understand. Um, how much time has passed while they're doing the assignment, and they'll either hyper focus or procrastinate and just totally lose track of time. Honest cognitive biases are something that we all kind of struggle with. So loss aversion, we all struggle with failure, and then we avoid anything that leads to failure or loss, and just being stuck in the present. And that kind of goes into temporal motivation theory, just this idea that delayed gratification, or sorry, or what's in front of us is more important. And also, which is a big problem with students who are autistic or just younger in general, it's a developmental thing, cognitive inflexibility, just being able to shift from one task to another. That's an issue with a lot of students where maybe they're very strong at math, but now it's time to shift and you have to turn in this English assignment, and they're just really resistant to doing that. And it's just difficult for them to shift from one assignment to another. So that's definitely going to affect your time management. Emotional, obviously. So you have to look at trauma and negative associations with the task. So I show this video. I watch How to ADHD. It's a YouTube channel by Jessica McCabe. And there's this cool episode called The Wall of Awful. And I use that metaphor a lot. And the wall of awful is basically this idea that a lot of times students procrastinate because they have a negative association with the task that's built up over time with metaphorical bricks. So just negative associations like, oh, I hate math because I failed at it, or because it's boring, or because I got yelled at one day, or because I just hate getting things wrong. And all these different things just add up over time to a barrier to doing the task. So addressing that through either positive reinforcement or reframing is going to be very powerful. Obviously, anxiety and depression. So I get a lot of intakes, and one of the first questions I ask is are there any underlying mental health issues that can be at the root of it? So sometimes it's executive functioning, sometimes it really. I'm sorry,
So
what was
the
that?
concept of universal.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard something. But yeah, so you have to address that root cause. And a lot of times when it's dire, we just refer out. If it's something where coaching isn't going to be effective. Boredom is a big issue, especially for students with ADHD. That's why stimulant medication works. Like the thing with ADHD, a lot of times is due to a lack of stimulation with the task. So if your child is really struggling with starting something, it really just might be because of a lack of interest. And that's something to really address. Logistical reasons, a lot of times with the older students I work with, they have very intense sports schedules or music after school, and that does get in the way of academics. So really teaching them structures, either using daily planners or calendars or apps to figure out how to organize their life. And a lot of the times, given their age, they're really not in control of their schedule, and that's where parents really come in to be able to assist with that. Having unrealistic expectations about doing certain assignments, which I'll go to in more detail with the case study. Lack of support and resources, which obviously isn't going to be the case, which is why you guys are here. All right, so just to go into this in a little bit more detail, so some specific behavioral strategies can be creating gamification or reward systems. So I have this next to me because I was planning on talking about gamification. So the Anti-Planner by Danny Donovan. It's a really cool book. It has about 165 strategies, a lot of them gamified. Simple things like color code this map of your room and clean it, and like check off one section of the room when you finish. Or I have parents who establish point systems just for students to do certain chores. That can help. Just anything you can think of, and then we'll go over different examples in a case study. But any way you can kind of gamify or make it stimulating for the student is going to definitely help. I already mentioned establish an accountability system will definitely help, and doing that in a way that isn't really a lot of pressure on the student. So making it seem like it's more of a suggestion than a demand is really going to help because they're really struggling through this. And then helping them tie important and urgent tasks to their goals and interests. So let's try to concretize this a little bit with a case study. All right, so we have Liam who struggles with procrastination. So Liam is bright but chronically procrastinates on homework, especially long-term projects. He feels overwhelmed and often waits until the last minute, which leads to stress and lowering of grades, lower grades than he's capable of. He loves video games and hanging out with friends. His parent Sarah is frustrated by Liam's procrastination and its impact on his academics. She's tried nagging and imposing strict rules with limited success. So I wanted to also offer a little bit of language for you. So this is how maybe I would consult Sarah. You can encourage Liam to study with a responsible friend for certain subjects, and they can check in on each other's progress. And this is how Sarah can frame it. Liam, I was thinking, sometimes it helps if you have someone else who's also working on their goals or homework. Would you be open to the idea of having a study buddy or an accountability partner? Very simple, right? Another idea is just creating a system. So I can suggest that Liam check in weekly to go over his important assignments and dates. And then the language that Sarah can use is each Sunday, let's have a brief weekly plan, weekly check in. You tell me your key assignments for the week, and we'll mark them on a shared calendar. No pressure, just a quick overview to keep things visible. And I think the no pressure part is really important. Like a lot of parents come to us kind of emotionally torn, and there's just a lot of conflict in the house given the procrastination and time management. And I totally get that. And a lot of times, like we offer ourselves as kind of relief. Um, we offer ourselves as kind of an outside source to kind of mediate that kind of family conflict because a lot of times you're just too close to the situation. You're going to get frustrated with your child, right? You're scared for their future and they really don't get it. But if you can, just really being able to breathe and just kind of step into that supportive role a little bit more is going to go a long way. And if not, honestly, that's what we're here for. So, and I know it can be very difficult. I'll try to speed through this a little bit faster. So, cognitive strategies. One of the bread and butters is chunking assignments into manageable steps. I'm promoting temptation bundling. That's basically putting a positive task with a task that's a student doesn't really like. So I'm trying to get one student, for example, accommodation for using headphones. She really likes listening to music while working on writing assignments, which she hates. So that would be an example of temptation bundling or pre-planned transition signals. So this can go with the cognitive inflexibility I was talking about. So you can use timers, Pomodoro technique. The idea is to just let the student know that, hey, we're going to work on this for 5 to 10 minutes and then we're going to transition, and this is the signal. This is how you know we're going to transition, like either a visual cue or the timer is going to go off. And here's a quick case study. So Maya is intelligent but struggles to start assignments even when she understands them. Stares at her books and computer screens for a long time, feeling stuck and unsure where to begin. Once she starts, she begins, but works. Once she starts, she can work effectively. She enjoys reading and creative writing. Her dad, David, is concerned about Maya's difficulty getting started, had tried breaking down tasks for her and setting timers, but the initial hurdle remains a significant challenge. So I would advise help Maya identify and articulate the very first smallest action required to begin a task. And then I say that because honestly, if whatever she's struggling with, you just have to meet her where she's at. She has to do this. Whatever she's trying to start is too difficult for her. If you literally have to boil it down to just like open it up to this page, then that's what you have to do. And then just give her a bigger goal next time. So, for example, Maya, for your history reading, what's the absolute first thing you need to do? Maybe just opening the textbook to the first page, right? And then honestly, there's a trigger inside of you that kind of goes off. There's something called the 3-2-1 strategy that I saw on YouTube. Like literally, you just close your eyes, you count 3-2-1, you get up, you go towards doing the task, and then you already have momentum towards doing that task. And once you start it, you kind of don't see a reason to stop. Like your blood's flowing, your brain's activated, and you kind of start just doing it and without thinking about it. So that's a pretty good technique to try out. Another thing, just 5 minutes. This will be like the bigger goal. Encourage Maya to commit to working on a task for a very short, manageable duration. So, Maya, how about set a timer for just 5 minutes and work on your science notes? If you're still feeling stuck after that, you can stop. And more likely, she's going to have momentum again and keep going. So, again, that's something else to try. Emotional strategy. So addressing anxiety, fear, and avoidance. Again, this wouldn't be therapy. So if the emotions are too intense, that's when we refer out. But there are some things that you can do in the moment, like positive reframing, focusing on small, achievable wins, basically celebrating any tiny success, and then opportunities for gamification, just trying to make it fun as much as you can. So here's a case study from Jennifer. So Jennifer is 14. She's a capable student, but avoids starting tasks, especially those she perceives as difficult or high stakes. She worries excessively about not doing a perfect job and gets paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. She enjoys playing music and art. Um, Her mom, Lisa, sees Jen's potential but is frustrated by her avoidance. Has tried encouraging her, but and reassuring her that mistakes are okay, but her anxiety around performance persists. And that's a common thing with perfectionism. It's not enough to just say it'll be okay. You kind of have to show them. But there's strategies for that. So I would consult with the parent. Instead of emphasizing the final outcome of a grade, Lisa can help Jennifer set a small, achievable goal that focuses on the process of learning and working rather than the end result. And then frame it as perfectionism toward like be perfect at this small, tiny goal. Like that'll be a way to reframe that. So, Jen, instead of thinking about the whole art project being perfect, how about we just focus on spending 15 minutes today experimenting with different brushstrokes? The goal isn't a finished piece, just exploring. And there's even an activity in this, in a cool, really easy to understand worksheet where the student fills out a checklist of all the nice to haves. I think it's all that, no, it's the have to do's and the nice to haves. So the perfectionism basically leans into the nice to haves. So basically, identify the things that you have to do to be proficient, and then the nice to haves will fall into place if you have enough time. And that's where the time management, the planning falls in. Um, Also, embrace imperfection. So, encourage Jennifer to aim for a first draft mentality where the initial goal is simply to get something down without judgment or striving for perfection. And this would be the have to do. So for your history paper, let's try brain dump first. Just get all your ideas down on paper as quickly as you can without worrying about grammar or making it sound perfect. Think of it as a messy first draft. And I think reframing that goal, like the goal is a first draft, the goal is not perfection, I think can pay some dividends. But again, it depends on the student. Okay, last area that I'm going to go over are the logistical strategies. So, creating structure, schedule routines, and organized environments. I spoke about this in a previous executive functioning workshop, but this is more specific to my time management. So, I use Kanban systems a lot. So, if you've heard of the app called Trello, it uses the same thing. And it's basically a kind of a worksheet that sets up columns for to-dos, doing, and getting it done. And the idea is that as the to-do list grows and it's not going to the right from the doing category to getting done, there's a visual reminder of procrastination. And so like using this with students weekly has been really helpful. And I use them all the time, especially with my older students. Breaking down larger goals into smaller SMART goals and tracking progress. So if you aren't familiar with SMART goals, it just stands for specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timely. And it's just a structured way for students to establish goals and track their progress and to make sure that their goals are realistic and that they're able to meet them. So you can actually go back to my previous presentation. And I think Malik actually also mentioned SMART goals in his previous executive function workshop. And then another thing is obviously practice self-advocacy and resourcefulness. So a lot of students don't practice self-advocacy because they don't really know how. And obviously the first step is building that metacognitive awareness. What is it that I struggle with? And then next, building that confidence that you are capable of approaching someone and asking for help. And then knowing where to look, really like tapping into that resourcefulness that we all have. All right, last case study from Ethan. So Ethan, 17, he's active in several clubs and has a part-time job. His schedule is filled with many short bursts of activity with little consistent time for focused homework. He often tries to squeeze studying into transit or short breaks, leading to ineffectiveness. He enjoys being busy and social. Mom worries about Ethan's ability to manage his demanding schedule, has suggested cutting back on activities, but Ethan is resistant, struggles to help him find consistent study time. So I would suggest to Maria that Ethan track his time for a few, that she helps Ethan track his time for a few days and see where it's actually going. Then work together to identify essential versus non-essential tasks, basically a time audit. So she can walk up to Ethan and say, Ethan, let's try a time audit for the next 3 days. Just jot down how you're spending your time in 30-minute blocks. This will give us a clear picture of your current schedule. Then we can look at what absolutely has to be there and what might have some flexibility. Because with somebody like Ethan, he's probably really scattered. He's just doing whatever is the next thing on his list. He probably doesn't even have a list. He's just figuring out what he needs to do next. So it would be really helpful to slow him down somehow, literally write it down on paper. I have another student who has a physical calendar that they write everything down in, and just have a visual of like what your week is going to look like, and just plan it out. Maybe that visual will be an intervention, and then Ethan will know, okay, maybe I need to cut this out and cut this out and really focus on my priorities. Um, and next, goal setting. Maybe Ethan doesn't have a clear view of where he's going and why he's doing all of this. So help Ethan schedule specific study times directly linked to achieving small, measurable steps within his SMART goals. So Maria can say, hey, Ethan, you mentioned wanting to finish your science project by the 18th. Let's schedule some specific work times this week to make sure that happens. How about Tuesday and Thursday, since I know you'll be home early those days? Obviously, because Maria knows Ethan's schedule. And I would add, also tying this to Ethan's long-term goals will be extremely helpful in crafting motivation and really just keeping him persistent in his goals. All right. So based on all of that, we've gone over logistical, emotional, behavioral, and cognitive strategies. Just thinking about those different areas of challenge for time management, which area of challenge do you think your teen or your loved one struggles with? I'm just curious. And I'm going to speak for myself. All right. I wrote logistical in there because I just have so much going on. I just finished 2 school programs and doing this full time and trying to fit everything into that schedule. It's just been a lot. Yep, and more than one is totally appropriate because it's probably going to be more than one. Yeah, a lot of students. Stephanie says she thinks a lot of students are overscheduled right now. I'm getting that a lot. Yeah, and that's something parents should be aware of, logistical and emotional. And another thing, a lot of these overlap, obviously. So, for example, emotional and behavioral, there's like a direct correlation between the two, obviously. I'm just kind of nitpicking and teasing this out. All right, thank you for that. All right, next, I wanted to go in a little bit more about this idea of temporal motivation theory. So I'm going to go ahead and share this video and then break it down a little bit more.
Temporal motivation theory explained. This motivational theory is developed by Piers Steele and Cornelius Koenig and emphasizes the impact of time and deadlines on our motivation to complete tasks. It states that our motivation can be explained with the following formula: expectancy and value, divided by impulsiveness and delay. Expectancy or self-efficacy is the probability that effort will lead to success and the desired reward. Value is the attractiveness of the reward. Impulsiveness is the individual's inability to resist temptations. Delay is the deadline or time to complete the task and receive the expected reward. So, in order to increase your motivation, you will have to increase the expectancy and value, and decrease the impulsiveness and delay. As a final point, the theory argues that as a deadline for completing an activity nears, the perceived usefulness or benefit of that activity increases exponentially.
All right, let's break this down a little bit. It's a lot more simple than it seems.
Temporal motivation.
All right, so again, this was broken down into a formula. Motivation to act equals value of the goal times expectation of success divided by impulsivity times delay to reward. Don't worry about all that. So let's just break it down. So value of the goal is literally just how important is the task or the outcome to the teen? What do they gain out of it? And then a lot of the times that's one of the biggest struggles, right? Why am I doing this? I'm not going to use math anyways. Like, why am I writing this? Why are we writing about this topic? Why are we learning about this topic in history? And sometimes it is hard to justify some of this. So a lot of it is really tying it to life skills or their own individual interests or just the idea of being successful, tapping into their intrinsic success. Their intrinsic motivation. Don't you want to be successful? What does success look like to you? Um, is a good way to think about it. Expectation of success is part of the formula. How confident are they that they can actually complete the task successfully? And obviously, that's when this wall of awful concept comes in. Do they have a negative association with the task? Do they have a history of repeated failure with the task? That's something that needs to be addressed to avoid procrastination. That's why it's a really important part of the formula. Impulsivity, obviously, the younger you are, the more impulsive you are. ADHD, a lot of the time, students with ADHD are a little bit more impulsive. Teens in general are a lot more impulsive. So, this is something that needs to be addressed. How easily are they distracted by immediate gratification or less important things? So there's going to be a lot of coaching that has to go into that. And then delay to reward or delayed gratification, as I mentioned in the beginning. How far in the future is the payoff for completing the task? Closer rewards are more motivating, obviously. So we'll go over one more example with Jackie. So Jackie is overwhelmed by a science report that's due in 2 weeks. She loves art, but finds science boring. So how would we apply temporal motivation theory to this case? So we will first want to increase Jackie's value or increase value for Jackie. Um, for example, Jackie, this report is a chance to explore something new, maybe even connect it to art somehow. A good grade helps you keep options open for future art programs. Again, she loves art. Boost success expectation. So, how do we do that? Jackie, let's break it down. First, just find 3 interesting facts about your topic. That's something you can definitely do. So, again, barriers to success, you want to eliminate that, right? So, just 3 interesting facts is going to eliminate barrier to success, and she's going to feel successful. Manage impulsivity. After you work on your report for 30 minutes, you can have a break to work on your art for 15 minutes. So that reward is coming soon, right? It's coming in 30 minutes. So she can see that. So as 10 minutes pass, she's like, all right, I just got 20 more minutes. Another 10 minutes, I just have 10 more minutes. And then finally, she gets to do her art for 5 minutes. And then it's worth the reward, right? Um, and then here I kind of repeat myself. Short and reward delay. When you finish your initial research notes, we can get you those new art supplies. Well, this is the total reward. So after you actually finish this, then yeah, you'll get the art supplies. So as much as you can leverage this, is going to be very, very powerful. At least into a lot of everything we know about psychology and classical conditioning, and it's just kind of neatly tied into this intimidating sounding concept called temporal motivation theory. But it really just is about limiting impulsivity, increasing value, um, and making the rewards come a little bit sooner. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, so it looks like we're towards the end of the presentation. So we went over why time management matters. It matters because there's a direct correlation to grades and academic performance, even more so than SAT scores. And in that sense, directly to life success. Why teens struggle with time management. We talked about different areas of struggle. We talked about cognitive reasons that teens can struggle, behavioral, emotional reasons, and logistical reasons. We went over some evidence-based strategies that can work, and all within the context of temporal motivation theory. And yep, and this is the wrap up itself. So,
Mhm.
all right, so that's the end of my presentation. So I'll leave the floor open for any questions.
Yeah,
Thank
we have some time for some questions. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. You can also turn your mic on and ask some questions as well. We have about 5-10 minutes if you had any questions. Yeah, I mean, scheduling time with BJ is incredibly hard. So right now is a good opportunity to just ask whatever questions you may have about maybe a teen in your life, or maybe if you have questions about educational therapy in general, or like executive functioning coaching, what that would look like in general, let us know.
you.
So one question from Lauren, BJ, is can you talk a little bit more about Trello and Kanban?
Yeah, I wonder if I can give me 1 second. Let me actually share a screen. I mean, share it. Kanban. Yeah, but in short, it's Trello itself literally just uses the Kanban model. So you'll see, I'm trying to explain it, but let me pull it up. You'll see just a simple framework where the student puts in their to-do list. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. 1 second. And then I can go over it better. Yeah. All right. This is a makeshift one that I made based on the app and just based on the Kanban system. Honestly, it's used in the corporate world a lot. And I added to this. This right here is the Kanban system, the to do, doing, and done. Just very simple. And then the idea is to put your to do list here. And then week by week, you move it over. So part of the check is, oh, okay, how are you doing with that research assignment? Have you started it? Yes, I'm on the second paragraph. Then I'll move it over here and then I'll get really specific about second paragraph and maybe put a goal under here. And then I'll also put the due date. So the goal is obviously to get it over here by the due date. And if not, what happens is this just gets super crowded with a bunch of different assignments. And then I see and the student sees what we need to work on. And so I'll have a checklist here, and then as soon as it gets crowded, it actually also shows us our priorities. So there's nothing in history, nothing in science, but there's like 5 different assignments in English, which also shows me this is probably your wall of awful. It's like you're avoiding English for some reason. So yeah, it's very simple. Just a to do, doing, and done worksheet that you can work on with students, and anybody can make this, to be honest, and
Yeah.
use it to track
And
students' weekly
I've
progress.
seen I've seen free templates online as well. And
Mhm.
so I'm sure if you Google it, you'll be able to find free templates. If you want our templates, shoot me an email. We can send you the one that we have.
Yeah.
Also we have a blog. I don't know if any of you have been on our blog, but we've got tons of free resources on our blog. We also have a YouTube channel where a recording of this workshop will be available in about a week. So if you want to share with someone or you want to refer back to it, we can, you can just YouTube strategies for learning and you'll find us. And then lastly, like I mentioned, our website is has a plethora of really great resources created by BJ and then the rest of our educational therapists and specialists. So it's not just executive functioning center resources about IEP prep, IEP versus 504 accommodations. We have lots of resources about dyslexia and math support. And so I would really recommend, signing up for our newsletter if you haven't, it's where you'll get access to a lot of those free resources. But yeah, if there's no more questions, we'll end the night a little bit early. I'm sure no one will complain about about
Nope.
ending a little early. So thank you again so much for joining us tonight. If you have any other questions, you can just send me an email. If you go on our website, strategiesforlearning.com, there's a contact form. It comes straight to me, so I see all of them. Send us an email if you have questions about our Beyond High School course or just summer support or just executive functioning support in general. Yeah, just shoot us an email. We're really happy to help you and connect. Yeah. But thank you so much, BJ, for your presentation with lots of really practical strategies for parents and for educators. And we hope to see all of you in future workshops. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So great
Thank
to
you
Thanks,
for
see
BJ.
coming.
you. Bye.
Bye.